Hello YouTube, and welcome to this new episode of the Lifter Profile series, in which we study the training methods and physiques of top natural lifters in order to improve and learn from them. If you remember at the end of the previous episode, I told you that the next entry was going to be quite controversial, because it was going to cover someone that many people did not believe was natural. And that is the very episode you're watching right now, because today, we are going to review Kellett, aka Overkell, also known as the Natural Arnold. A controversial nickname to say the least, because as you might guess, many people do not believe him to be natural. And that is exactly why I decided to give him a spot in this series. It's because if we can sort of come to a conclusion that there could be a chance he might be natural, then we have to look at his methods, because this means that he got to such a monstrous physique with training and nutrition alone. And I think that you would admit that if that's the case, we both have a lot to learn from the guy. But before we get into that, I wanted to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, you guys. It is thanks to you that this channel is able to run as it has been running for the past month, and that I am able to put in so much effort and time into making these videos. It's all of your support, and I could never repay you guys enough for it. So if you're also interested in helping me, helping the channel and supporting my work, you can do so by visiting the first link in the description. It's my Ko-fi page. You can do a donation, you can pledge, everything is appreciated. Now that this has been said, let's look at today's episode and the way it's going to be structured. So usually, these lifter profile series are split between three parts. The first one is the program review, in which I analyze the lifter's split, so we take a look at the person's training. Then the second part is their methodology and philosophy in relation to said training, in which we try to look at the key takeaways that we can learn from them and their methods. And then the third part is a physique critique, in which I give every body part of the lifter a grade ranked from S to F. And then we discuss their strong points, their weak points, what they can improve on, and the reason why some of them are so strong in relation to their training or their genetic potential. But today, I'm going to have to add a fourth part in which I'll be covering the numerous arguments that people use to claim that Overkell isn't natural. And I did not want to do that, but you sort of understand that it's going to be a necessity, because if 50% plus of you guys watch this video thinking, oh, there's no way the guy is natural, you're never going to actually retain what I have to say about it. You'll just dismiss everything he does, because of course, if you take PEDs, everything works. And since I also agree with that, this is why I'm going to open with this quote-unquote natty or not section. Understand, it's not a natty or not. Natty or not are stupid. The people who make it and the people who consume it tend to know nothing about lifting. They tend to be interested in the wrong thing, which is looking at someone else and what they do. You should really be focusing on yourself. But since the goal is for you to learn something today, I first and foremost need to make sure that you're at least somewhat convinced that the guy could be natural, or else you're likely to just dismiss the entire thing and everything that he has to teach you. I also want to make clear that I'm not friends with Overkell. I've never spoken to the guy. I do not give a fuck either way if he is natural. So my goal isn't really to convince you one way or the other. It's just to present the evidence that I've gathered logically, and then to just let you make up your mind. So if at the end of this part one you think, okay, I think the guy is on juice and age, then you can just shut down the video. And if what I'm going to share with you that I've gathered, my detective work, convinces you that there is a chance he could be natural, then you can stick around. So let's get into it. I don't want to spend a million hours on this portion because it's not super interesting, even though I know for a fact that many of you guys clicked strictly because you want to see that part one. So here are the top arguments that people use to claim that Kellett isn't natural. The first one that you hear a ton is, he's just as big as Arnold. Of course, his nickname is the Natural Arnold, so you will have people who will tell you, well, Arnold isn't natural, he is just as big as Arnold, aka he cannot possibly be not on juice. He must be on something at least a little bit. And that would actually make sense, even though that type of reasoning of comparing people doesn't necessarily work all the time, because some people are on juice and they just don't know how to train at all, so they have shit physiques. But in this case, it doesn't even really work, because these two people are not the same. And I know it's a little bit of a mindfuck because they do have very similar proportions. That's why the nickname of Natural Arnold is so fitting for the guys, because they both have small waists, they both have massive chests, and they have very similar proportions in the arms, the legs, etc. So at first glance, they do look alike. That is until you look at their stats, because looking at their stats quickly reveal that there is actually a massive difference between the two. So Joel, I'm going to pronounce it à la française, is 6'1", and Arnold is 6'2". So they're roughly the same height. But Joel's stage is around 200 pounds. So his stage weight, is 200 pounds. While Arnold's stepped on stage at around 240, 250. That's, for anyone who knows anything about bodybuilding, is a massive, massive difference. And on top of that, Arnold was not only 50 pounds heavier on stage, he was also much, much leaner. Joel is not that lean. Most of the time, he's around 13-14% body fat, meaning that the difference in lean body mass between the two is even more pronounced. We're talking about a potential difference of 40 pounds. And of course, it's 40 pounds of water and other things, but it's still 40 fucking pounds at a leaner body weight. So anyone who claims, oh, he's just as big as Arnold, no, he's not. If they were put side by side, Arnold would look much, much bigger. He would entirely dwarf him. And that's not to take anything away from Overkell. It's just that if you put a Natty next to someone who's on PEDs, naturally the Natty is going to get dwarfed. It's absolutely normal. So to see that Joel is a form of downsized Arnold sort of makes sense if one is natural and the other one isn't. But talking about Arnold, many people would also point out to the fact that there is a muscle on Joel's frame that is super developed to the point that it looks like it's only really possible on drugs, and that is his chest. His chest is absolutely massive, and he does have this full look that PD users get, where the chest is very round and very full and still has nice striations and separations, and to many people that's only possible on PEDs. And I think that's sort of receivable, because it's true that in truth, I've seen lifters and natural lifters with great chests. I have a pretty good chest myself, but I've never seen one taken to that extreme. So I sort of understand why people think that it's absolutely impossible. But you have to keep in mind that this could also be because, one, he has excellent insertions. He has no gap in between the pecs, and his pecs insert very deep, so he has a nice round pec. And on top of that, he's obsessed with training them. And even though genetics and drugs play a role, of course, the environment in which you evolve in terms of bodybuilding, like culture, also plays a role, meaning that times and times again, I've encountered people who had at least one body part who was so developed, it looked like it was enhanced, but the rest of the body did not look like that. And that was every single time because the person was absolutely obsessed with that body part. And it's not surprising, therefore, to see that for Joel, his obsession was chest. He has always had a good chest. If you go back, even when he got started, his chest was always a massive strong point. So it could be a mix of genetics and just personal obsession. If you want another example of a lifter that I believe is natural, who also showcases the same trait, look at GVS. GVS's triceps look like they belong on someone on PEDs. And yet, compared to the rest of the body, the rest of the body is not that developed. Why? He has good insertions and he trains them like a maniac. So he ends up with a muscle that is much, much more advanced than the rest of the body. And that tends to divert the attention away from the other muscles, because if you have one body part that's super strong and the others that are sort of weak or incomplete around it, people's eyes always go to the strong body part and they say, oh, this must be juice. Okay, but what about the rest? And that is when I want to discuss a very interesting phenomenon in bodybuilding that is known as the cheerleader effect. So technically the cheerleader effect doesn't apply to bodybuilding directly. It's the notion that when there is a group of girls, you have a tendency to look at them as more attractive than they really are because they're in a group. So it's the idea that faces are more attractive when flanked with other faces rather than isolation. So if you took one of these girls away from the group and you just looked at her, you would be able to see and tell that she's not that pretty. But in the group, you're being fooled because they're all together, so they all look more attractive. And I actually do believe that this also applies for muscles, meaning that if you have one strong muscle next to a very weak one, people's attention are going to go towards the very strong one, so the weak one is going to look less weak in comparison. And this checks out for Joel, because if you look at his chest, yes, it's incredible, but look at his shoulders. The shoulders are fairly underdeveloped in relation to the chest. And then look at his core. His core is pretty garbage. He has a 2-pack, but no one is going to pay attention to that shit because his chest is so massive. So it's a form of illusion. It shows that he knows what he's doing, because bodybuilding is a game of illusion. But it's something to keep in mind, because people tend to forget that when they call him enhanced, as if they weren't body parts that clearly did not look enhanced. They only look at what confirms their theory, which is the chest. And this is, by the way, another hole in the PED hypothesis. If he is on PEDs, which I don't deny, again, I don't give a fuck whether or not he is on PEDs. My question is the following. How come his chest is so big, but the other muscle groups didn't catch up? Because a key trait of PED users is usually that they have massive shoulders and traps, usually so developed that they mug the rest of the physique. And yet for him, it's the exact opposite. These two body parts are underdeveloped. And I think they're underdeveloped on purpose because he likes the look. But if you're on drugs, you don't really have a choice. The amount of time I've met PED users in the gym who had shit physiques, but then just massive shoulders and traps out of nowhere, because these muscles respond very, very effectively to androgenic drugs, is too many to count. And then you also have the fact that none of the things that tend to happen to PED users happen to him. So for example, he has great skin and he also has a full head of hair. And I know that the two are not necessarily correlated. It's possible to be on a shit ton of drugs and still have long hair and a good skin. But I think that, as we say in French, ça fait un peu beaucoup là. There's a lot of things that seem to point to him not being on anything. And when you say that, you have some people who come up with a theory that I believe is interesting, which is that he manages to get these results without any of the side effects that usually come with the drugs, because he selects his compounds very precisely. So the idea is that he knows which compounds do what, and he only picks the ones that are not going to make him lose his hair or get greasy skin or pimples, and also the ones that are not going to be too androgenic. Again, I don't say that this is not possible. The only question I have is, if it is so easy to just dodge the side effects on PEDs, how do we explain that so many PED users end up with horrible skins, end up bald, or end up with physiques that look fucked up because they're completely all over the place? I mean, is Joel the only person who knows about that and he kept the secret for himself and his buddies? Again, a possibility. It would just point out to every other PED users being fucking idiots. And since I already believe that most PED users are idiots, I also buy into that. But I also want to point out the irony of the type of people who say things like this. Because you could think that to have such a high level of knowledge in compounds and drugs and whatnot, we would have to face people who are also on drugs. But the majority of people who waste their life away on like Natty or not forums tend to be natties themselves. And at which point, I think that instead of wasting your life away watching more plates, more dates and learning all about trend, what about just training? Have you tried that? Have these people actually tried that shit? Actually training for 10 years and seeing what your results are going to be at the end? Because even if the guy is on drugs, nothing is more pathetic than a bunch of small fucking natties that waste their life away like the natty police, observing the body parts of every single dude and saying, oh yeah, he must be on Deca, he must be on Mastro, he must be on this, he must be on that. What about you? What are you on? Nothing. So shut the fuck up, get to the gym and train. I will never understand the mentality of these people, and yet they are out there. However, even though these arguments that I just outlined are fairly stupid and easy to dismiss, there is one that is harder to push aside, and that is the pretty drastic facial transformation that Joel went through throughout the years. So, you know, when you take PEDs, it's not just the muscles that get bigger, it's everything that gets bigger. So your organs start to enlarge, and also your bones start to enlarge. So if you take GH and all that shit, your feet are going to grow, your hands are going to grow, your nose is going to grow, the cartilage in your body is going to grow. And that's when you end up with those dudes who look like Mr. Potato. So their face is now way too big for their eyes and their mouth. They have way too much real estate. The same thing is sort of happening to him. So he himself posted a picture of like from age 26 to like 32 or something. And you can clearly see that his facial structure, especially his jawline, changed drastically to the point that now he has those two like tennis balls on the sides of his jaw that I've only really seen on PED users, and one that actually comes to mind is Tom Platz. Tom Platz was famous for having these big jaw muscles, and he never trained them. It's just that his body responded to anabolic steroids in that fashion, and his face just changed entirely. It's really, really fishy in my opinion that someone in his late 20s, who is apparently a natural, would undergo such a massive facial transformation. He claims it's the result of diet, because he has a clean diet now. I don't buy that shit at all. If he had said, oh, it's because I train my jawline now, I'd be like, okay, maybe. But out of the blue, that type of growth, yeah, usually that is a sign that the person is actually using growth hormone. So that's one thing that would point to him actually not being natty. And then in terms of transformation, you also have to keep in mind that we're dealing with someone here who had a pretty decent natural physique for a lot of years, but then he went through a drastic transformation in his late 20s, and that was in the span of like weeks. I'm going to post a picture that he posted, where in 12 weeks, he went from like bear mode, aesthetic, lots of muscle and good looking, but nothing insane, to like stage ready. And again, it could just be because he lost fat, it's better lighting. I mean, that plays a role, but it's sort of also fishy that he would manage that transformation so late into his training. Or at least, it's what I would have said a few years back. But we have started to notice this trend of natural lifters unlocking new knowledge and also new potential later on in their training journey, and almost experiencing a new form of newbie gains. And even some of the noble natties have went through it, so it's becoming more and more widespread. So it could also just be a change of methodology. It could just be that, yes, he did discover a brand new method of training and he managed to unlock new gains that way. Or it could also be that we are all liars and we're all on PEDs, but I'm going to let you be the judge of that. And then there's the fact that Joel is in his 30s and he's been training seriously since he was 20. So that amount of baggage weights something. It plays a role. I know that some people think, oh, you train 5 years and then you get no gains whatsoever. I don't believe that because it hasn't been my experience at all. Actually, I think that it sort of points to him potentially being natural because unlike a lot of the noble natties, me included, none of us have been training for 10 years. Like you look at Alex, you look at me, Bold Omni-Man, GVS, we've been training for 10 years, but like getting our shit together and really focusing on hypertrophy and bodybuilding, none of us can actually say that we put in our 10 years. He is one of the few people that can, and as I've used to say in the past, no one trains for 10 years. So we don't really know what an actual natural physique looks like when getting that amount of work. And this also might be the reason why his physique appears so unrealistic. Because I'll be honest with you guys, when I look at his body, I'm like, okay, like, are you on something? Because he's so much bigger than I am, and he looks so much better, that I'm thinking, okay, I don't see myself looking like this, but maybe it's just because I'm wrong. I could just be a fucking idiot, and I just need to shut my mouth and keep training, and one day I will be there. This is what we have to deal with here. He just might be a super outlier, both in terms of stats, because again, he's 6'1", that's super rare, and in terms of training age. So to claim that he cannot possibly be natural because there's no other natural that looks like him or even comes close to his physique isn't receivable either, because there's also no natural lifter that comes close to the amount of work he's been putting in. And that becomes doubly true when you look at the way the guy trains. That's going to make a lot more sense when you see his split. And I want to make that clear because it's always funny to me when I see influencers, and it's always natural ones, who have this tendency of thinking like, okay, I'm big and I'm natural, and so I represent a form of apex, right? And then anyone who like breaches that apex suddenly isn't natural because they're bigger than them. But what type of bullshit thinking is that? So now you're the maître étalon, as we say in French. You are what decides who's natural or not. I certainly don't fucking think like this. I know that I don't have great potential for bodybuilding, and I certainly also know that many of you guys are going to get much bigger and much more aesthetic than I am. So for him to be able to look better and be bigger than me, unless I had a massive ego, I don't see how I could claim that this means that the guy must be on steroids. And it's the same for people who claim that since he's an influencer, he must be on drugs. Like with this fucking logic, everyone is on drugs. I'm on drugs, GVS is on drugs. And maybe you think like this. I saw a post recently of someone who was like, oh yeah, the noble natties, they're all on PEDs because they make money off of their body. Sure, I guess, but what proves that? I mean, just because people in the past lied about their status doesn't mean that we lie about our status. It's possible to put on mass without being on PEDs, especially considering that our business model, if that's even a business model for the most part, is not to sell shit. We just give free stuff to people. We have nothing to sell. I don't sell you supplements to get a big bicep like me. I have nothing to offer to you that is going to get you that. I've always told you that the only thing that fucking works is hard work, and that is it. The only thing I can do is I can facilitate that hard work by telling you what is going to work or not with programs and hypertrophy stuff. And the guy is the exact same. I mean, Joel, I think he doesn't take any supplements. He's not sponsored by supplements. The only thing he sells, I think, is training and ebooks. And I don't see why that's bad, because the methods in the ebooks, as you'll see, are fairly sound. It's nothing crazy. So I don't think that's receivable to say he's on drugs just because he's an influencer. But it is true that he does hang out and do business, and that's a problem, with well-known PED users who claim to be on TRT. It's those people from like Generation Iron. I think it's these guys who are all like a bunch of 40-year-olds on TRT who claim low doses and who look absolutely insane. So they must be blasting out of their assholes. I don't quite understand why he associates with these people. Like, if you want to actually promote natural lifting, why the fuck do you actually associate with PED users? That's completely stupid. So even if he is natural, he's a bit of a fucking asshole, because that's really not the way to go about it. But again, he is his own man and he does what he wants. It's just that birds of a feather flock together. You see that with these Gymshark kids, all of these kids that hang around together, they're all on drugs. So this could also be a sign that he is on drugs. And then you have the other side of his personality, where outside of that in his business, he seems to be a family man, he is a father, and he seems to be level-headed. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders. And it's so funny that I would say that because I'm his junior. It's like I'm judging him like, oh, he's such a good boy. I'm saying that just to say that, like, my instinct tells me that there shouldn't be a reason for him to be on anything. And also the fact that by being on something, he would endanger his life and potentially die without getting the chance of seeing his daughter grow up. I would hope that he would be smarter than that. That being said, there are plenty of people on this platform who have kids, who have a family, who love them, who are on trend and who are going to die in their 40s. So people are dumb as fuck, and he might be dumb as fuck as well. So in conclusion about this Natty or not part, we cannot definitely claim that the guy is natural. It's absolutely impossible. But this also means that we cannot prove that he is on. But personally, considering that he only looks enhanced in pictures or with a pump, I buy that he is natural because GVS is the same. People don't get the difference between a good lighting, a good pump, and a good angle in relation to just standing there. Like, if I just stand there, I mean, sure, I look sort of big, you can see my arms, but I have a shirt, I'm covered up. But if I get a good pump and I'm shirtless, I look massive. That's normal. It's called bodybuilding. If you wear something on you that covers you, you don't look like you lift in relation to when you don't have a shirt. That should be obvious. And it's true for him too. I'm going to show you some footage of him just standing there in a shirt. Many people would say, oh, do you even lift, bro? Oh, you don't look like you lift, bro. And then he takes off his shirt and it's like, oh, you're on PEDs. That's how the brain of people works. I mean, I don't quite understand that mentality or logic, but since these are the people who claim, oh, he cannot be natural, I don't think that this holds a lot of salt either. And then again, there's also the fact that he's been training for 10 years plus. And if you're not allowed to look fucking spectacular after 10 years of lifting naturally, what even is the point? Right? This is also something to keep in mind. If we're going to fight back against PED users, and we have shitty ass physiques, and if we do get good physiques, we now are put in the PED users like basket, then there's no way to win. So just for the sake of inspiration for naturals, I want to believe that this guy is actually Natty. I want to believe that this is what we can actually look like if we put in the work for 10 years plus. So that being established, again, you make up your own mind. Let's begin with part 2, the actually interesting stuff, the training split. So from what I could gather from interviews, Joel trains 2 times a day. So it's 2 sessions a day. And he does between 16 to 20 sets per body part per session, twice per week. Okay, so it's not 1 time per week. He trains twice a day. It's a body part split. He only trains 1 muscle at a time. And he does that twice per week. So if you want hard numbers, this means that he does 32 to 40 sets for 1 muscle a week. And that is, of course, super high volume. I don't know many people who train like this. I think maybe GVS does that much. But yes, at face value, what the fuck? Who needs that much? And the worst part is that the 16 to 20 sets is only for certain muscle groups like biceps or triceps, which are small. For back and legs, he oftentimes does more than 20 sets per session. That's crazy. Like for back, it's already crazy enough, even though the back can take a lot of torture. But for the legs, can you imagine doing 25 sets of legs in one session and doing that twice a week? Most people would die. Then you take into account also that he trains 6 days a week, so he takes only 1 day off. So that's 12 sessions a week, 6 times 2. And if you look at the amount of sets, this means that it makes up for a total of around 240 sets for the entire body per week. In relation and comparison, I, your servitor, only get about 110 to 120 sets for the entirety of the body, okay, per week. So he gets double what I do. He works twice as hard. And that's with the same frequency, because we both train 6 times a week. And that is explained also by the fact, of course, that he does 2 sessions a day. And a lot of people, when they see that, will just point that out as being impossible, right? This should not be possible to recover from for someone who is natural. It is a dead giveaway that the guy is on PEDs. But there is a caveat. There's actually something to keep in mind, and that is that the majority of these sets are actually warm-up sets, because the most of the time, if he does 5 sets, 2 to 3 of them are warm-up sets, and he counts them towards his set goal, meaning that you can actually divide his amount of sets by 2. The amount of hard sets and walking sets that he does is actually half of what I just said, in which case it looks a bit more reasonable. This means that he does between around 16 to 20 sets per muscle group per week. So now it looks much more attainable for most people. But the reason why I included them is because Joel has made clear in the past that in his opinion, these sets count. His warm-up sets count towards hypertrophy, so I included them because that's what he says. Then you also have to look at the fact that Joel uses very lightweight for all of his sets. And by lightweight, I mean that he uses 15 pounds for lateral raises for his top set and 90 pounds on overhead press. And a lot of people would actually point to that being also a dead giveaway for him being on PEDs, because usually people who train with lightweight and super high reps tend to be guys who are on a bunch of drugs, because it is widely known nowadays that natural lifters can only get big by lifting heavy weights. We're going to reserve judgment for now, because this approach to bodybuilding is in line with his training philosophy, and it's something that we'll review later. But essentially, he doesn't really focus on weight on the bar, but rather on the sensation. And here is what his weekly split would look like. So this is what a week of lifting looks like for Joel Kellett. On Monday, he does legs in the morning and chest in the afternoon. On Tuesday, he does back in the morning and shoulders in the afternoon. And on Wednesday, he does arms in the morning and abs and calves in the afternoon. And he repeats that twice a week. And some people could point that out and say, okay, well, that's a bro split. And you would actually be wrong in saying that. A bro split is defined as something where you go into the gym, you hit one muscle 1 time a week for a shit ton of sets. But if you do it twice, it goes from bro split to a simple body part split, because the frequency is now doubled. And he utilizes it in order to focus 100% of his attention on one muscle at a time. This is also part of his philosophy that we're going to detail later. But for now, let's look at his actual training. Let's look at what an actual day of Joel Kellett's training split looks like. And let's begin with back. So a typical back day for Overkell would be 5 sets of pull-ups to failure to open the workout. That already points to him following orthodox methods. He's not opening with a bullshit single arm pull down to like isolate the muscle better. He's doing time-tested compound movements that bodybuilders have been doing for 100 years, solid pull-ups. The only thing that's a little bit striking here is that he doesn't use weight. Someone as advanced as him doesn't actually do weighted pull-ups. He sticks to bodyweight pull-ups and he simply goes to failure. But when you look at the way he does them very slow and controlled. And that is much harder. I know that many people like to bang out pull-ups. When you actually take the time to go through the negative slowly and you don't rebound using the actual momentum of your body weight, yeah, you don't get as many reps at all, and what you feel in your muscle is entirely different. So 5 actual sets of bodyweight pull-up for someone who is 200 pounds plus is actually pretty good. Then he actually continues with 4 to 5 sets of neutral grip lat pull downs. So it's another movement to finish, quote unquote, the lats. And that, according to me, would already be where you're good. You don't need to do more than that. He does 8 to 15 reps. His reps are always super, super high, and he goes to failure. So now we have a solid opening to a back day. But where it gets a little bit weird is that he continues. So after the neutral grip lat pull downs, he does 3 to 4 sets of behind the neck pull downs. And at this point, the question is why? You know, no pun intended, but that's clearly overkill. Your lats are already tired and taxed, and if they're not, it means that you just need to use more intensity in the opening sets. There is really no need to do that amount of volume when you can just lift more weight and be done with it faster with lower reps. But that is his method. I'm just telling you what he does. Then he does 5 sets of T-bar rows. And again, always remember that when I say 5 sets, it means 2 to 3 sets of warm-up and then 2 walking sets. And the way he does T-bar rows is on an elevation, so it's a deficit T-bar row, and he really, really allows the upper back to round to get the stretch. So he also doesn't use that much weight, and he focuses more on form. And he insists a lot also on the fact that you should not be using too much weight, because the more weight you use, the more vertical your torso becomes, and the less you recruit the entirety of the back. So this is more of a trap movement and of a rhomboid movement. It still hits the lats, but I would say that this is a good movement for a back day, even though I'm not a fan of T-bar rows, because you also get a lot of hinging motion in there, a lot of posterior chain, which is sort of a blessing on that day, because you'll see that the guy doesn't really do pulls from the floor. So it's actually a good thing that he does some of that here. And then he continues with 5 sets of cable rows. And this is why, by the way, I don't like bro splits. And even though that's not a bro split, it's a pure body part split. I also don't like standalone body part splits because there's no reason for that shit. Like, when you train one body part a day, you end up doing stuff like this because you have to justify your travel distance to the gym. So now you end up doing a gazillion sets you could have just split throughout the week. But again, this is the way he trains. We're here to listen to what he has to say about it, not me. I'm just the reporter. So 5 sets of pull-ups, 5 sets of neutral grip lat pull downs, 4 sets of behind the neck pull downs, 5 sets of T-bar rows, 5 sets of cable rows, 3 sets of hammer strength rows. The only thing that is modified a bit is that when he hits the hammer strength, he does only 3 sets. So he reduces the volume because he's already tired. But this is pretty standard for him because from what I understand, he always does 5 exercises per session, sometimes 6, sometimes 4, all focused on the same body part. So for back, this is what you end up with. Now let's look at what it actually means for arms. So a typical arm day for Joel would be opening with a tricep push down done as a drop set. So he'll have a partner or he'll do it himself where he'll just keep going until he cannot go anymore. And he doesn't start with a compound, which is something I always advocate with an arm day, because might as well start with like a close grip bench or a GM press that gives you a bit of shoulders and chest. Since you're there anyways, an arm day doesn't mean that you just have to eat arms. You can also eat other body parts like upper back or chest, which I always recommend also. But the reason why he doesn't do it also makes sense in my opinion. It's because when you train twice a week, it's good to have a day where you do no compounds whatsoever, because there's a strong chance that the next day in the morning or even the morning off, you already did compounds for the upper body, in which case you might be tired. So he starts with his cable triceps push downs, 5 sets. And then he does dumbbell scroll crushers. So one exercise that is more, let's say, lateral head of the tricep and long head at the same time. And then a scroll crusher that is more long head, 2 warm-up sets, 3 walking sets. And I think he used like 30 pounds, so not too bad, but for someone who has such massive arms, I would have thought he would use more weight. You'll see that again. For him, it's not about the weight, it's about the sensation. So he focuses a ton on form and technique. Then we move on to biceps. So he has hit 2 tricep movements, and then he does 5 sets of preacher curls with 2 warm-up sets beforehand that are part of the 5 sets. And he only uses 70 pounds. And you know, I buy the importance of form and tempo as much as the next guy, but when you have arms that are like close to 19 inches and biceps the size of a football, 70 pounds really? I mean, I'm a weakling and I'm not for strength standards at all, but I always find it weird when such big guys move such little weight. At the end of the day, you could also say that it's because he goes full range of motion, that is possible. And he superset these preacher curls with overhead cable triceps extensions with no rest. So what he does is he just bounces from one to another, no rest at all, which also could contribute to him not being able to use that much weight. Also not something I'm a fan of, and I've been clear about that on the channel. When you artificially lower your performance by not taking the rest that you need or doing drop sets all the time, I don't think you're really doing yourself any favor. You're just accumulating volume when you're in a fatigued state. I don't think that's the best for hypertrophy. It clearly works for him. After that, he moves to another bicep movement, so that's 2 triceps movements, a 3rd tricep movement, plus a bicep movement, and this time it's spider curls. So a good choice, in my opinion, alongside a preacher curl. And then he wraps up the day with 5 sets of reverse curls, so a forearm and brachioradialis exercise. Always a good idea to have on your arm day. And that wraps up the day. So you see that even though on paper he trains like a maniac with a shit ton of volume, actually his days don't take that long. Like this arm day shouldn't take you more than an hour. The back day might take you an hour and 20 minutes. But I think this is on purpose. It's because when you go to the gym twice a day, every day, 6 days a week, you have to keep the fire going. And if you went 2 hours every day, twice a day, you would not be able to do that. And it's something he said in an interview as well. He finds it easier to do a lot of volume by splitting sessions. So he's always more fired up to train twice a day, 1 hour, than 1 time a day, 2 hours. It's also because, of course, it's his job, right? He has the time to do that. Many people don't have that opportunity. But for him, that is how he makes it work. And actually, as compared to the back day, where I would never encourage anyone to actually have a back day, especially not one like this, because it just makes more sense to do your back day with like movements like the chin-ups where you train biceps at the same time, or movements like the RDL where you hit posterior chain at the same time, instead of just trying to isolate the back like a maniac like this. The arm day is actually pretty good. You can pretty much copy paste this arm day and do it yourself, and it's a great addition to any program who lacks an arm day. The only thing I would do is take away one of the triceps movements. You really don't need that many on a single day. And then we have shoulders. So shoulders is going to be interesting because, well, many natural lifters report that the way they got big shoulders was by spamming compounds, by getting really strong at presses, both horizontal and vertical. So let's see how he does it. He begins the day with 5 sets of lateral raises, and the way he does it is not like he usually does with like 3 warm-up sets. Actually here, 4 of the 5 sets are warm-up sets. So the first 2 sets are 20 reps sets, set 3 and 4 are 15 reps sets, and the last set is an AMRAP with as much weight as possible, and in this case it's like 15 pounds. So it's pretty much baby weight lateral raises with slow tempo. I personally don't think that this would give you big shoulders, but this is how he opens his day. Then 5 sets of rear dart flies, and he never goes below 15 reps. Like 15 reps is not his top end of the range, it's the bottom end of the range. So it's always higher than that, and that is for all isolation exercises, but he takes all the sets to failure. So it's very lightweight, very high reps, and he takes everything to failure, which in the most cases means when the pump just prevents him from going forward, because the guy is a big believer in the pump. Then we finally get a compound movement, and that is 5 sets of behind the head press in the 10 to 12 rep range, again with like 90 pounds, so not much weight at all. And Joel actually says something interesting in the video where he does these, where he says that anything below 7 to 8 reps isn't really bodybuilding, it's like strength training. That also, in my opinion, couldn't be further from the truth. It's very important for natural bodybuilders to go into the 6 to 10 rep range, 4 to 8 is good, a 3x5 here and there can be good to actually promote performance. He never does this. So we're dealing with someone who literally never goes below 8 reps. Again, many people would point out that this is the exact way PD users train. Then he does 5 sets of dumbbell shrugs, 10 to 20 reps, so very high again, and he focuses on form. The fact that the dumbbell shrugs find their way onto a shoulder day is not that surprising. The shoulders connect to the traps, so oftentimes when people train shoulders, they will also train traps. And on that day, he only does these 4 exercises with only 1 compound movement, 2 light isolation movements, and then the quote-unquote heavy shrugs, because he does go heavy. So even though his physique in itself, I must be honest, does look fishy, but is not a dead giveaway of him being on something, if there is one thing that would actually point to him not being natty, it's that. It's that method of training, because honestly, I've never met a single natural lifter in my life who trains like this. Every top natty I know, they train heavy, they train intense, and they focus on compound movements. If you look at the data that I outlined, the vast majority of these movements are isolation stuff. You don't have lots of heavy compounds, save for like the pull-ups, the behind the head overhead press. It clearly works for him. He clearly looks tremendous. I personally would never advise anyone to actually train like this. But my opinion aside, what can we learn from his split and what can we learn from his philosophy? Well, the first key takeaway to open this part 3 about Joel's training philosophy is that he puts a huge emphasis on volume and not so much on intensity. He's not that concerned about pushing heavy weights, at least in terms of weight on the bar, because intensity is not only a 3-rep max, it's not only low reps. Intensity can also be the accumulation of heavy, difficult sets by utilizing stuff like drop sets, like cluster sets, etc. So there are ways to tap into the muscle and to force the muscle to adapt that do not require to push heavy weight. That is an absolute truth. It's just that these methods should be the cherry on top and not the entire cake. For him, it's literally the entire cake. He has stated in the past, as I said, that you should not go lower than 7 or 8 reps, and he also claims to not care at all about how much weight he's lifting. And he also only selects exercises that give him a good pump, so he's sort of like Arnold in that sense, where he only wants the sensation, he only wants to actually feel the muscle while he's doing the exercise, which also explains why he doesn't like compounds. Many compounds are not that great for the pump. It's really hard to focus when you have to actually be coordinated because multiple joints are moving at once, which explains why he has such a big focus on isolation, because isolation gives you a much better pump, and why he approaches compound movements with a bodybuilding mindset, because he bastardizes them. He takes compound movements and he transforms them into isolation, or at least as much as possible, by not caring about weight on the bar. Instead, he focuses on stuff like the mind-muscle connection, increasing range of motion, slowing down tempo, focusing on the stretch, shortening the rest times, etc., etc. All methods, as I said previously, that do increase the intensity of your training sessions. It's just that it's much less efficient and straightforward than just adding weight on the bar. But to him, this is how you get the most out of least weight. His priority in the gym, and his priority is clearly not to get strong. Any noob would be able to push that. But what he would say to this, I think, is, yeah, noobs can push that weight, but not in the fashion that I'm doing it. So his method of progressively overloading focuses much more on building work capacity and accumulating volume rather than pushing performance in the gym via strength. And the way he does that, the way he builds that work capacity to be able to do so many sets, is by slowly adding to his sessions. So he will just start to slowly taper up like a powerlifter would with weight on the bar. But for him, it would be to sneak in an extra set or an extra rep here and there. And once he gets to a point where his sessions become way too big and way too lengthy for him, he just splits the day. So he might begin with like a back and bicep day or like an arms and shoulder day, add sets until he gets to a point where he trains for 2 hours, and then he splits it in 2 and he does arms in the morning and shoulders in the afternoon. So it's a comprehensive system. You see that even though I don't agree with the system at all, I can sort of understand where he's coming from. It makes sense. That is actually a smart way to build up volume and work capacity, because work capacity is essential. And this is, by the way, the reason why he claims he has such a good physique. His point is that by making his body able to recover from such work, even if he doesn't lift that heavy, that is still such an amount of stress and volume on the muscle that the muscle has to grow. Keeping in mind also that with this method of 2 sessions a day, he's able to do twice the amount of sets without having to lower his training frequency, because unlike a bro split, he can still train the same body part twice a week with that method. And that's really the difference between the marathon workouts of the silver era, which used to be like 3 hours full body, where you would destroy the chest, the shoulder, the back, every single muscle you could think of 3 times a week, and the 2 times a day approach that the golden era bodybuilders tend to favor much more. So someone like Arnold, unsurprisingly, was also training like this. And this links also to a belief that both Joel and Arnold share, and that is that this method of training that focuses more on volume as opposed to intensity helps lose body fat. It's something that you might have heard. If you do a ton of supersets, if you really solicitate the muscle and really bombard it with volume, the muscle gets leaner. I don't know about that. You can wait on it in the comments if you want, but that is the reason why he trains the way he trains. And as you can tell, it's because he takes such inspiration from 70s bodybuilders that he also has just replicated their splits. As he also replicated their drug use, it very well could be, because I don't think that anyone, if they attempted to train like this, without the help of supplements, would be able to. His point and his justification to that would be also that, yeah, it wouldn't be possible because you wouldn't be able to just jump into that amount of volume. You would need to actually build up to it. And another thing that I would say is fairly healthy and sort of points to him not having an enhanced mindset in relation to bodybuilding is that he doesn't really believe in stepping on stage under super low body fat. So if you look at his pictures, he looks tremendous, but he's never shredded. He never has shredded glutes or hamstrings or shoulders. He has always like 13, 12% body fat, which also keeps him big, which might explain why some people think he's not natural, is because we're not used to it. The vast majority of natural bodybuilders sadly follow the practices of PED users where they are constantly dieting and bulking, so they're either super cloudy and with no definition whatsoever and big, or they're shredded but they look malnourished and sickly on stage, which I don't think is impressive. Here you are someone who's always in the middle, and he also claims that this is the reason why he's been progressing for so long, is because, and he has a point, when you spend half of the year every year dieting down, you're not making any progress during that time period. So if you do 10 years of that, you wasted 5 of them. 5 years during which you made 0 progress in the gym. But if someone like him doesn't do that, what does that mean? Well, it means that he keeps progressing. He's not actually losing on any hypertrophy gains, and he's continuously able to put on mass by dodging the massive cutting and bulking cycles that tend to just lead to people spinning their wheels. Then in terms of recovery, he also believes that sleep is super, super important. So he claims to sleep 9 to 10 hours a night, and that is also logical. The more you train, the more time you need to recover, because many people get it wrong. It's not your recovery that needs to match your training. It's your training that needs to match your recovery. So if you train once a week, for example, I don't give a fuck how much you recover from it. You did not do enough damage to the muscle to justify that amount of rest, so most likely you're not going to grow much. In his case, if he does so much in the gym, it would make sense that he would need to recover that much. So that also checks out. And yeah, this is not the type of lifestyle that just about anyone can follow, because 2 sessions a week, you live in the gym pretty much, you eat 6 times a day, you sleep 10 hours. I know for a fact that I would not be able to actually put in that amount of effort, because when you have a job and when you have other things going on, you simply don't have the time. But for him, that is his job. I think he's a personal trainer and he sells ebooks, so he gets to actually live that lifestyle. And I know it's something that people don't like to hear. I know it's always annoying when PED users on a gram of shit tell you, oh, I look like this because I work harder than you. Yeah, that might be the case, but it's also because you are on enough shit to kill an entire herd of elephants. Here, however, it's tough to deny that we're dealing with someone who has an extraordinary dedication to bodybuilding, and so it's not that surprising that he would get extraordinary gains from it. And you can also tell that he genuinely enjoys it. He actually likes it. And he said in an interview that the only way to train the way he trains is to enjoy it, because I would shoot myself in the face if I had to train like he does. An hour twice a day of low weight without pushing myself and without actually like feeling like I'm getting intensity, I would get bored within 20 minutes and leave. He doesn't get bored because he focuses on the sensation. He doesn't give a fuck about the weight. And if there's a takeaway you actually remember from his philosophy, it's that you need to find a training method that fits your needs, your goals, what you actually can do, and then also something that you like. There's no point in trying to be someone else. So if you, after this video, think, okay, I believe that Overkell is natural and I'm going to train just like him to look like him, that's never going to happen. Even if his methods actually work, they won't work for you. right? You need to find what works for you. Because if you never do that, you're going to attempt what he does, you're going to fail, and then you're going to be the type of person that says, oh, I couldn't look like that naturally training the way he does, so there's no way he can, he must be on drugs. Well, as he would say, and he said in an interview, it doesn't work like that. Your limitations are not other people's limitations, so don't become an imitation, and most likely you will not face any limitations. And I think that PDs or not, this is always a good mindset to have. I personally quite enjoy his mentality when it comes to the gym, even though I don't agree with his methodology. Now, let's move on to part 4, the physique critique part. And you might find it a bit hypocritical for me to critique the physique of someone who clearly looks better and is bigger. But you always have to keep in mind one thing, and that is that I am French and we have no shame whatsoever. So I'm going to gladly shit on his physique even though he would completely dwarf me in real life. So, as you understand, it functions like this. I'm going to look at body parts in particular and give them a grade. And I think it's going to be quite interesting with him in particular because we're going to be able to break the cheerleader effect. If you look at his body in globality, you could think, oh, PD user, there's no way he's not on drugs. But actually, when you start to look at each body part separately, things get a little bit more blurry. So let's open with the obvious one, the chest. The chest is an S. I mean, his chest makes no sense whatsoever. It's 3D, it's massive, it pops, it's just a gorgeous chest that you would want to fall asleep on at night. I'm sure that it would make a perfect pillow. Then you have the shoulders that connect to the chest. And even though the shoulders are really underdeveloped in relation to the chest, by themselves, anyone would be happy to have that set of shoulders, so I'm giving him an A, but he doesn't have that weird PD user thing going on where they look like watermelons, so not an S. And I know some natural lifters who have a better shoulder girdle that he does, so that also would point to him potentially being natural as well. Then you have his biceps, so he's not nicknamed the natural Arnold for no reason. Biceps and chest are both S. I would actually be extremely curious to know how big his arms are. I would bet close to 19 inches, even lean, maybe even bigger than that. Because even his long head of the tricep is a fucking S. Like his arms are perfect. Perfect insertions, perfect shape, beautiful, beautiful arms. To the point that even though his lateral head of the triceps are underdeveloped, are only a B, no one is gonna fucking notice because of the cheerleader effect. He flexes and you just forget everything. It's like, you're mesmerized by the shape and by the flow of the arms and the chest, because keep in mind that, yes, when you flex, what connects to the arm directly is the chest. So when both these muscle groups are extremely dominant, you have a match made in heaven. Then you also have the quads, which are really, really good. They're not tree trunks, because again, it's not his aesthetic. He's going for the golden era ratios. So they're only quote-unquote an A, but they're gorgeous as well, peeled, nice structure to them. They don't overflow. And they also accentuate how tiny his waist is, because he has a really, really tiny waist, which makes the entire thing look wonderful. So from the front, I perfectly understand why people are like, oh, the guy is on juice, there's no way around it, because the beach muscles are all on fleek. And that is golden era aesthetics. It's looking like a monster from the front. That's what a lot of these guys were doing. Nowadays, shows are won from the back, whatever that fucking means, so it's not true anymore. But even in the silver era, it was chest, it was arms all day, every day. Even someone like Steve Reeves had very strong chest and arms for that reason. It's because he focused on it and Joel focused on it as well. But then you take a look at the rest of the physique and you start to realize that there are plenty of holes. For example, the abs. He has a terrible six-pack. Actually, he doesn't have a six-pack. He has a two-pack. He has the two top abs. And even when he gets really lean, you barely see the rest. I don't know if it's genetics or because he doesn't train them, but he can thank the cheerleader effect for the fact that no one seems to notice. Also because he eats vacuums, which in a way is genius. If your core is not that good, fucking eat a vacuum. And now no one sees your core because it just shapes the body up and it just puts the eye directly on what's on top of the core, which is the chest. But C tier, he could really get much better abs if he wanted. Then you have the lats. From the front, his lats are nothing to sneeze at, but are not that big. And even from the back, he doesn't have that turtle shell at all. So they're only really a B tier. And the traps are in the same ball game. So the lower traps, I would give them a B, middle traps as well. Upper traps an A, they're much more developed. Again, it goes with the entire front of the body aesthetic. The front of the body is really developed. The teres major and minors, however, are an A. They're really, really good. But for the upper back, I actually know plenty of natural lifters that dwarf him and that have much better upper backs, like Alex Leonidas, like Board Omni-Man, like Erzoviak. These three dudes have better backs than these guys, and that's non-negotiable. That is verifiable. From the front, he smokes them, but from the back, it's a battle, and he's losing that battle. And that's not even talking about his worst body parts, because that's the upper back. When you start to look down there, you realize that, yes, there is a lot of weak points that are quote-unquote hidden underneath all that greatness. And that is the erectors, the glutes, and the hamstrings, which are all C tier. He has no posterior chain to speak of, and actually it's the first time I see a potential natural lifter who doesn't have a big ass. Every natural lifter I know has massive glutes and cake. This guy has like a flat ass, he has a pancake ass. What the fuck is going on here? Well, I'll tell you what the fuck is going on. He skips legs, but doesn't skip legs in the sense that he doesn't train them. He trains legs intensely, he has massive quads, but he skips hip hinges. And if you look at his program, I couldn't find RDRs, no good mornings, I couldn't find any deadlifts, and that's for a simple reason also. It's because it's not in line with his aesthetics. The golden era did not like these movements because they thicken the waist, and in Roddy, it's not the waist they thicken, it's the posterior chain. They give you massive glutes and they give you massive hamstrings and horse legs, and the guy just doesn't want that. So from the back, when he turns around, you look at the upper back, you're like, okay, could use some work, and then you look at the legs, you're like, Jesus Christ, it's like the guy has never picked up a weight in his life. It's also for the fact and the reason that he has long legs, which participate in the elegance of his physique, but that also makes it that the legs from the back look skinny. And the calves actually don't help the situation at all because he has shit calves as well, they're C tier. So we see here that this entire, all of his body parts are super developed, he must be on drugs, is complete bullshit. It's the cheerleader effect. A lot of his body parts are underdeveloped, and that's by design. But there's also the reason why 90% of his pictures on his Instagram are from the front. Or if he turns, he does a quarter turn and you only see the upper back in relation to the bicep. It's because the rest is not that impressive at all. And this is something that I want you guys to keep in mind. When influencers post pictures of them, they post their best pictures and they show their best selves. They're not going to show shitty angles. So don't say, oh, he must be on drugs. Or he's just showing you what he wants you to see so that you think, oh, the guy is massive. Because if the guy only posted pictures of his glutes, I mean, some people would buy into that. Some people would be interested, maybe you. But for the most part, the bros would be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, go eat some squats or whatever. Then you have the neck and the forearms to complete the entire tableau. Neck is an A, he has a pretty developed neck. And the forearms are a B. But again, since they're connected to the biceps, no one is going to notice. But are actually fairly underdeveloped in relation to the rest of the physique. So as you see, my Frenchness knows no bound because I actually found a bunch of weak points and weak links in the physique of someone that many people say must be on a bunch of drugs. But if there's one takeaway you remember from that physique critique is that you don't have to focus on every single muscle to have a good physique or even a physique that will make people think that you're on juice. You just have to focus on certain key muscles, get them extremely advanced, and that is that. People are going to flip their shit. And of course, it would be best if you did that for your own sake. Hit the muscles that align with your aesthetic goals, and the ones you don't care about, leave them underdeveloped. I'm not saying don't train them, but don't insist on them. I know people who train legs, even though they have no passion for it, because they don't want to be called like a chicken leg or people saying that they're not serious. Fuck these people. Live for your aesthetics. You think I'm going to bully this guy into doing RDLs to get a thicker posterior chain? No, he doesn't give a fuck. He has his aesthetic and he sticks to it. And this is true for a lot of the lifters that we covered in this series. If you've missed the previous installments, they're in the description. But look at Erzoviak, look at people like GVS. Yeah, they have weak points, but so what? We all have weak points. What matters is your aesthetic goal and the flow. And this is what this guy, Joel Kellett, has in spades. Flow. His physique flows. You know why? Because he's building a statue that he enjoys and a statue that therefore people are going to admire as well. And I'm going to leave you on these wise words. If you have any names that you would want to see actually get an entry in this lifter profile series, let me know. I would be happy to do that. And I'm going to see you very soon. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.